So welcome back to this session on change, and hopefully you watched those couple of videos and you've completed and uploaded your worksheet. Yeah, good. Okay, so let's just quickly review those couple of videos. So Cotter's one, he talked about a way of dealing with resistance, about co-opting people in, or forget it, get rid of them no matter who. Well, that's one way, and I can see what he's talking about, but it's probably true really, but the chances that we're going to be able to do that all the time is not true, is not possible. Hopefully we'll identify in the planning stage and then we can deal with it, because we haven't always got the power or the authority to just get rid of someone, and it's not really that realistic a lot of the time either. So we need to plan and communicate and hopefully avoid those situations. He talked about some common barriers, and we'll talk about those in a minute. And he also talked about some of the situations. And then in the other video, with a little bit comical, but it did show us some barriers. There were some clear barriers there in that workplace clip, such as it didn't appear that the staff had been involved, because he said, you have come up with this plan. There was resistance developing, the workforce weren't happy about it, and it definitely hadn't been individualized, and there'd not been enough thought about the impact on individuals as the person tried to put across about their roles and how it would go ahead. So we need to be careful about those sort of things. And then on the activity worksheet, you looked at strategies for dealing with common barriers to change, and there was some listed there, and hopefully your assessor's given you some feedback on those. But just quickly to review those barriers. Not enough understanding about the change itself, always a clear barrier. If people haven't got a clear vision, direction, know what the priorities are, then they're not going to understand why or what the change is for, so there's going to be a barrier there. People not being inspired and engaged due to the lack of clear leadership. They're never really able to get momentum then, and people don't feel involved. So you get no engagement and no buy-in from the key stakeholders, and this is either identified key stakeholders or we've just failed to identify them or engage them. No employee involvement. It just increases resistance due to the fear of the unknown, the lack of confidence, the lack of feeling they've been involved. Or no proper consideration of any barriers. So just saying, oh, there won't be, because people will just do what they'll need to do, because that just causes resistance straight away. We need to mitigate against it by planning and thinking about it and leading the engagement and getting people on board so that we've sort of shown it. And 6 there, it talks about individual impacts not considered. That was part of the issue in the video. It leads to a lack of engagement by lowering morale and people thinking it's not about me and it's just an overall thing and we're going to do it anyway. Not having any quick wins or poor communication of them. People love to see quick wins as we go through it individually or if we see them overall. A culture that's bad or not aligned to the vision of the change. As we said right back at the beginning in some of the tools, we've got to look at how the culture is set against what we're planning to change. If we're planning a change of continuous improvement, etc., and that's not part of the culture already, then we might have to change the culture first. Success is not recognised, so that could be that they're not communicated or they're not celebrated, and we need to keep celebrating them to increase the pace of the change, to gain the commitment and the way of doing new things. We shouldn't make presumptions that people know about it. It requires extra effort. People need to see that their efforts are paying off and that their contribution is being valued, or they become demoralized. And then finally, unknown or unrecognized current state. We talked about gap analysis. If people don't recognize the state that they're currently in, they don't understand where they are and what could be the consequences of that, then they're not going to be looking forward to changing it or improving it. And then moving on, we need to make sure that we're able to monitor the progress and the implementation of the change. How's it going, what we're doing? We should have a change plan, and that should provide a route map or a journey planner showing not only where we're going, but where we've come from and where we are up to and what we still want to do, what we still need to achieve. We'll need to ensure that we have a clear structure and a team with responsibilities for areas of that, and that'll include things like a communication strategy, including stakeholders, team updates, feedbacks, whether that's briefings or via a website or whatever our chosen method of communication is. We'll need to plan clear milestones, so we need those quick wins in there, some planned information with key milestones, as well as tracking of those milestones, so showing progression and completion. It could be via a Gantt chart or any other method we choose, but it needs to be accessible so that it can be updated, monitored and tracked and reviewed by everybody. And the monitoring is going to include things such as regular updates, so reviewing progress on a regular basis depending on the level of activity and the time frame of the change plan. Challenging underlying assumptions. While we're monitoring it, we need to keep an eye on those underlying assumptions, because they can develop and continue to push the validity of what we're trying to do and influence those unanticipated events, and try and make sure that those underlying assumptions don't build up. And we need to keep the champions on board to achieve that and keep them up to date. The change champions need to be up to date so they can influence and monitor that sort of ongoing process and motivate people. They are meant to be keeping others on board, so they need to be kept on board. And then we need to maintain the commitment. Every change related action must have a due date with dates and milestones, and we cannot afford to forget them, because if we forget them, people think, oh, there it's slipping already. And then finally, conduct short-term ongoing reviews. Maybe, I don't know, suggest team huddles where people come together just to talk about how it's going, what's coming on, so we're sort of reloading the ideas and re-energizing people in an informal way. And these huddles can also allow us to distinguish who in our team is struggling, who are people that could help us get things done, and people whose motivation is perhaps dropping off, and then we can target those people individually and give them additional support that we've talked about previously. Right then, so that's bringing this session to an end, and our overall aim was to know how to initiate and manage change, and I think we've looked at a number of areas of those, and you've got a bit more research to do about models, etc., and looking at which ones could be good for your situation. But we said by the end of the session we would describe the process for initiating change and highlight the key considerations that must be taken into account, and we looked at those at the beginning. Said we'd analyse and compare some tools and techniques for planning change, and we looked at some different models, and then we looked at some tools, and as I said, you need to research those further. We'll assess potential barriers to change and identify how these can overcome, and we've just done an activity on that, and we'll explain appropriate systems for monitoring and assessing the progress of change. We've talked about that in general terms just now, but you'll need to look at your own organisation and see how that could be, or how they've got that set in place. But you know, they may have certain ways of setting up a change group and a change management panel or whatever, but the theory's the same about the communication that we just talked about. So that's the end of this session. You can now move on to session 4, which is about management reporting and the use of technology.